Hello everyone, myself as Muhammad Asif, and today I will be briefing about the concept of fingerprint examination. Talking about fingerprint examination, the first thing that comes to our mind is what are fingerprints? Fingerprints are nothing but the impressions left by the friction ridges of a human finger. For example, consider holding a pen to write something onto a paper. While you are holding a pen, the impressions which were left onto the pen by the friction ridges that are present on the human skin, such impressions are known as fingerprints. Certainly, the impressions left by the palm are considered as the palm prints. The impressions left by the foot are considered as the footprints. The scientific study of fingerprints is called as dactylography. So why do we study these fingerprints? The fingerprints are unique to each and every individual. They're difficult to alter and durable over the life of the individual. So these characteristics such as uniqueness, difficulty to alter and durable over the life of an individual makes them suitable for long-term markers to identify humans. As I was saying, the fingerprints were unique. No two individuals have the fingerprints that are exactly alike. Even the identical twins, they do not possess similar fingerprints. The fingerprints can be visible to the naked eye. Such prints are known as patent prints, and the fingerprints which are not visible to the naked eye, such prints are known as latent prints. We will be discussing the types of prints later. So, and the fingerprints have the very characteristic feature which makes them really helpful for the examination. Even in cases of injuries or burns, the wrist structure of a fingerprint doesn't change until unless the injury is up to third degree, or the injury is till to the cut of the fingers. So when such a injuries or such a minor injuries, even the burns or the scrapes are happen to an individual, they do not change the wrist structure. When the new skin grows in the same pattern, the ridges patterns that came back. Now, fundamental principles of fingerprints. A fingerprint is individual characteristic. No two fingers have identical ridge characteristics. I was saying earlier, the fingerprints are unique to each and every individual. In a similar way, the fingerprint characteristics are very individual for each and every finger. So thus no two fingers possess same ridge patterns or same ridge characteristics as the another fingers. A fingerprint will remain unchanged during an individual's lifetime. From the beginning of the birth to the end of an individual, the fingerprints will remain unchanged. Fingerprints have general ridge patterns which make it possible to systematically classify them. Patterns. There are various types of patterns which are seen in fingerprint examinations, such as arch patterns, loop patterns, and fold patterns. Other than these three, we have another type of patterns known as composite or accidental types of patterns that are seen during the fingerprint examinations. So, talking about arch types of patterns, the arch types of patterns are the most rarest types of patterns that are seen during the fingerprint examination. They are about 5% in the overall population. So if you see the picture here, the arch patterns, the ridge flow starts from one end of the fingerprint and moves towards the another end of the fingerprint. So while the ridge flow starts and moves towards another end, it tends to form a curve that looks like an arch. Hence these patterns are known as arch-like patterns. In arch-like patterns, in arch patterns, the thing to be remembered is they do not possess the deltas. So the arch patterns, they do not have deltas. The arch patterns are basically two types. They are plain arches and the tinted arches. The plain arches are the arches that are similar to this picture, while the tinted arches are tend to be mixed with the delta, and they form a steep arch-like structure. Then we have loops. The loop pattern. In the loop pattern, the ridge flow starts from the one end of the fingerprint, moves towards the core of the fingerprint, and comes back to the same direction the ridge flow entered. So making it as a look like a loop. So in loop patterns, the fingerprints, the ridge, it enters from one end and meets the core and come back to the same side which it entered. So it forms a loop. Hence these are considered as a loop patterns. In loop patterns, the delta is always opposite to the side of the loop that is formed. The loops are basically two types. They are ulnar loops and there are radial loops. The ulnar loops are the loops in which the direction of the loop is towards the ulnar side, that is the ulnar bone side, towards the little finger, and the radial loops are the patterns in which the loop direction is towards the radial bone, that is radius bone towards the thumb. So those are known as radial loops. Then we have hole. The hole patterns are about 25 to 35% in the overall population. In the hole patterns, the ridge flow is towards the center of the core, which makes a circular pattern, or sometimes it also makes elliptical pattern. So depending upon the type of the circles that are forming, the holes are again categorized as plain holes. So the holes have a circular formation of ridge flow towards the core and they possess two deltas, delta 1, delta 2. So if you see the picture 1, this is a plain hole where the ridge flow is in a circular pattern and it possesses two deltas on the both sides of the fingerprint. While if you see the second picture, you'll find the ridge flow is towards the core of the fingerprint, yet in a elliptical formation. Hence, these types of holes are considered as elliptical holes. Then we have, as discussed earlier, these are the types of arch and these are the types of loops. It is a plain arch where there is a single formation, a simple formation of an arch, and it does not possess any delta. And in a tented arch, it looks like a formation of delta, yet it doesn't have the delta, which is a steep formation of arch. It looks like delta, but it doesn't possess a delta. So these type of patterns are known as tented arch patterns. And then we have ulnar loop pattern, in which the direction of the loop is towards the ulnar bone, and in radial loop, the direction of the loop is towards the radial bone. Then we have accidental type of patterns. The accidental type of patterns are nothing but the patterns with the mixture or combination of one or two patterns in a singular form. Then we have types of fingerprints. So the fingerprints play a very important role in crime scene investigation. Generally, there are three types of fingerprints, namely plastic prints, those are also known as 3D prints, then patent prints, also known as 2D prints, and latent prints, also known as invisible prints. The plastic prints or the 3D prints are made by pressing your fingers on wax, soap, fresh paint, etc. And these are easily preserved and easily visible to the naked eyes. While coming to the patent prints are the impressions left onto the surfaces such as blood, grease, ink, or dirt. These are easily visible to the naked eyes, but they need to be developed properly and preserved properly. Latent prints are the prints made by sweat, oil on the skin surface, which are present on the surface but are invisible to the naked eyes. So they need to be developed chemically, or using the chemicals, or using the developing powder methods, and they need to be preserved. So the collection of fingerprints basically depends upon the surface on which they are present. So the development techniques for the collection of fingerprints is completely dependent on the surface onto which the fingerprints are present. So what are the various characteristics of the surfaces? We need to know that. So there are various types of surfaces, such as porous surfaces, non-porous surfaces, and semi-porous surfaces. So porous surfaces such as paper, cardboard, and untreated wood. Non-porous surfaces again categorized into smooth non-porous surfaces and rough non-porous surfaces. In smooth non-porous surfaces, examples such as painted surfaces, glass, plastic, fiber, and in rough non-porous surfaces we have vinyl, leather, and other textured surfaces such as textiles, etc. So hence, we need to study the characteristics of the surfaces, so that we need to understand which type of the methods that are needed to be used for the collection of fingerprints. So for development of fingerprints on, suppose we say, the porous surfaces, generally chemical methods like ninhydrin is used. After the development of the fingerprints with the help of the methods, they need to be photographed and they need to be preserved. For example, on non-porous surfaces, the powders and the brush techniques can be utilized for the development of fingerprints, and they will be lifted using the tapes, or they will be lifted using the gel lifters, etc. And talking about the development of fingerprints, we have various methods for the development of fingerprints, such as powder methods, and we have chemical methods. Now, talking about powder methods, we have various types of powders, which were used during the development of fingerprints, depending on the color of the surface, the type of the surface. So, the carbon black is one of the most used fingerprint powder, which consists of a charcoal and a binder, which is applied on the light colored surfaces, which produce a dark gray image. Then we have a white powder made from hydronate white and a dusting component made from titanium dioxide. Sometimes the white powder is also made up of zinc sulfides oxide, etc., which is used to apply on the dark colored surface. Then we have magnetic powder. Magnetic powder consists of iron powder, are the iron particles and binders. A magnetic wand with a soft plastic surface is used to pick up and apply the powder. Then we have fluorescent powder. The colorants found in these are treated with the treated dyes, which reacts with UV and visible light spectrums, especially used on multicolored surfaces. So, lift, lifting of the fingerprints. The lifting of the fingerprints can be done using the adhesive tapes, gel lifters, or a silicon casting material known as microsil. The picture shown here describes the types of brushes used in the development of fingerprints using the powder methods. Namely, camel hair brush is used, or stitch hair brushes are used. Secondly, we have chemical methods for the development of fingerprints. In chemical methods, mixture of two or more compounds is used for the development of fingerprints. These chemicals react with the specific components of a fingerprint residue, such as amino acids, proteins, inorganic salts, to produce a contrast, and uh, hence the fingerprints are visible to the naked eye. There are various chemical methods such as ninhydrin, iodine fuming for the development of fingerprints. Ninhydrin chemical method for the development of fingerprints. In ninhydrin method, the ninhydrin compound is taken and dissolved in ethanol or acetone with some amount of buffer such as distilled water to make it a sprayable liquid. So this ninhydrin spray is sprayed over the areas that are suspected to have the fingerprints. If the suspected areas possess the fingerprints, the spray, the ninhydrin will react with the amino acids and forms a purple color known as Reheman's purple. Hence, make the fingerprints visible. If you see the figure here, this is how the purple, the fingerprints will be developed, and this is how the color will look like. So these need to be preserved very quickly. They need to be photographed as they tend to the spray tends to dissolve in the air, which makes the fingerprints invisible again. Nextly, we have iodine fuming method for the development of fingerprints. The principle behind iodine fuming is sublimation. The iodine fumes are absorbed into the body fats of the oily substances present in the latent fluids, and they produce a dark contrast brown color which fades with the time. So if you see in the picture, uh, upon sublimation of the iodine particles, which releases or vaporizes into fumes, which are absorbed onto the fingerprint residue, forming a dark brown fingerprint pattern. Hence, this is how the iodine fuming works, and the prints are formed in the development process. But these prints they will fade with the time. Hence, they need to be preserved with the starch, or they need to be photographed quickly. This iodine fuming technique can be used in porous and semi-porous surfaces. Then the next part after the development of fingerprints is photography. So the pictures you see here are representing the fingerprints from iodine fuming and nitrate. So while doing the photography, we need to mention the date of collection, time, and the location. As of now, we discussed what are fingerprints, what are the patterns, what are the types of fingerprints, and the methods for the development of fingerprints. So after development of fingerprints, we need to identify the fingerprints with the suspect prints. So how the identification of fingerprints is done. So after the development of fingerprints, the fingerprints are identified based on their patterns, minutiae, rich tracing, rich counting. So to analyze the fingerprints with a suspect and question mark. So minutiae, firstly, will narrow the fingerprints into based upon their patterns. If the patterns are similar, if the patterns are different from each another, then we can say that the fingerprints are not of same individual. If the fingerprint patterns are similar, then we need to further investigate the fingerprints. In further investigation, the minutiae are the details which helps us narrowing down the fingerprints with a suspect or the question mark. So minutiae are the minute details of the rich flows that are present on the fingerprints, which helps us in the identification of a fingerprint. So the minutiae are namely ridge ending, bifurcations, dots, bifurcations, hooks, spur, etc. So bifurcation, for example, is a minutia where the ridge flow is the one single ridge flow is bifurcated into two, while as in trifurcation, a single ridge flow is divided into three ridges. Then we have, so the image here represents the counting of minutiae. The minutiae in the fingerprint can be counted either in a clockwise or either in an anti-clockwise direction. They cannot be counted simultaneously from random sides. So, so for example, if a fingerprint A is having 16 minutiae, then if the fingerprint B is having only 12 minutiae and that are not in a exact locations as of fingerprint A, then the fingerprint is not considered to be similar. But in another scenario, if the minutiae in a fingerprint A are exactly similar as the minutiae in the fingerprint B, then the fingerprints are described as similar fingerprints. Nextly, we have ridge counting. Ridge counting is process of counting the ridges that are that crosses the line that is drawn imaginarily between delta to the core. The ridge counting is mostly done on loops. For example, consider there are two fingerprints which are having the same pattern, such as ulnar loop. Now, the image or the fingerprint 1 is having 17 lines that are crossing between delta and core. Then there are 16 lines in fingerprint 2 which are crossing between delta and core. So how these lines are being crossed? Uh, the counting process of these ridges is known as ridge counting. In ridge counting, if you see the image here, there will be a line, imaginary line, which will be drawn between delta to core. So the following ridges which crosses these imaginary line are counted from delta to core. This process is known as ridge counting. Nextly, we have ridge tracing. Ridge tracing is the process of coursing or tracing the ridges that flows from one delta to another delta. So the ridges that originate mainly from the left delta flows towards the right delta. You know, the intervening ridges between these deltas are considered. So these ridges are traced. There are three subdivisions in ridge tracing, such as inner, meeting, or outer. If the ridge flow is more than three ridges towards the inner side, then it is considered as inner. If the ridge flow is more than through two ridges towards the meet, then it is considered as meet. If the ridge flow is more than three ridges towards the outer side of the delta, then it is considered as outer. So these are the references from where the content has been recovered from. That's all for today. Thank you.